Thank you for having us, everyone. These first songs are by Samuel Barber, selections from the Hermit Songs, which I believe premiered in 1951. The texts are very interesting. They're actually, these songs were all written by monks, scholars from the 8th to 12th centuries. They were writing little poems and little gossip things, items in the ledgers, or in the margins of illustrated manuscripts. So as they copied the gospel over and did the illustrated manuscripts, like you might know from the Book of Kells, which is a famous Irish text, these are Irish monks writing little gossips, little prayers, little thoughts in the margins of their work, and they were discovered much later and translated to English. Some of the texts were originally in Latin or in Irish, Gaelic, Irish, yeah. Thank you. First one is at St. Patrick's Purgatory.
And since these are monks in the monastery, you'll be hearing a lot of church bells, especially in the first and the last song.
Yes, listen for the church bells.
Churches and the bells, bewailing your sores and your wounds, but not a tear shall I squeeze from my eyes, not moisten an eye after so much sin. Pity me, O King. What shall I do with a heart that seeks only its own ease? Oh, only begotten Son, by whom all men were made, who shunned not the death by 3 wounds. Pity me on my pilgrimage to Lochner. And I, with a heart not softer than a stone, I do not know with whom maiden will sleep. But I do know that fair Aidan will not sleep alone. White Penger, how happy we are, alone together, scholar and cat. Each has his own work to do daily. For you it is hunting, for me study. Your shining eye watches the wall, my feeble eye is fixed on a book. You rejoice when your claws entrap a mouse. I rejoice when my mind fathoms a problem. pleased with his own art, neither hinders the other. Thus we live ever, without tedium and envy. Panger, white Panger, how happy we are, alone together, scholar and cat. Panger, white Panger, how happy we are.
Thank you very much. That was Promiscuity and the Monk and His Cat. You might have heard the cat walking across the keyboard there. This final selection is called The Desire for Hermitage. To be all alone in a little cell with nobody near me. Beloved, that pilgrimage before the last pilgrimage to death, singing the passing hours to cloudy heaven, feeding upon dry bread and water from the cold spring that will be an end to evil when I am alone in a lovely little corner among tombs, far from the houses of the great. To be all alone in a little cell, to be all alone, all alone, I came into the world. Alone I shall go from it.
Thank you for sharing your vocal gift. The volume is, oh God, you guys want to do the math? I don't. Quick math, volume's approximately 22, a whole bunch of cubic miles. Okay. Basically, there's one asteroid every million cubic miles. Means if you're going from Earth to the moon, you may find one. I don't think you really have to dodge these things. You know, it's like, oh, there's one. Right. And if you took all the asteroids, put them all together, that's about 15% the mass of Mercury, which is a small one. Okay, now, thanks to magic, we have that star in the middle. Little yellow one, that's approximately me. That red circle around it, that's the orbit of Mars. Now, the asteroid belt is between those two red circles going around. That's how big they are. And picture 1/15 or 15% the mass of that human hair spread out over that range. Asteroid belt is kind of empty. Next up, the big guy, Jupiter, 87,000 miles across. Woo! Orbiting 483 million miles from the sun. Diameter, hey, 1/4 of an inch. We got that. We can all picture that. That's a paperclip diameter. And it is 130 feet away from us. There's the approximate orbit of Jupiter going around me, going around us. The pretty one, Saturn, diameter 73,000 miles, orbiting 890 million miles away from the sun. We'll keep with 1/4 inch, 250 feet away. When you are leaving today, after you cross the street, and then you cross state line, look down, see if you find part of a paperclip down there. That's Saturn. Okay, I taught freshmen for 20 years. The next one always gave me problems. Hey guys, I'm going to show you a picture of Uranus. Okay, Uranus. That's a safe way to say it. Neat thing about Uranus, you see the rings. Uranus is tilted 90 degrees off its axis. Something, they believe, smashed into it a long time ago, knocking it on its side. So instead of orbiting or rotating like this, it rotates like this as it goes around in orbit. Diameter 31 million, it's 1 billion miles from the sun. We'll use that paperclip. And way out there in the parking lot. Some of you probably parked in the parking lot today. When you get there, look around for half of a paperclip. Neptune, diameter 30,000, yada, yada, yada. When you get way the heck past the parking lot, look for that half of a paperclip again. All right, so I think that pretty much wraps up the solar system. Huh? Okay, since you insist, the other one. I'm going to, okay, you all know Pluto is no longer a major planet, it's a minor planet. Okay, we can talk about it. Okay, it's smaller than our moon. And there are reasons that they demoted it. We can get into those later. Okay, it's way the heck out there. Yeah, okay. Now, real quick, let's go to the next closest star. We've done the solar system, and with the sun there, next planet, way out there for the next closest, or for our solar system. How far out is the next closest star? We think out there at the Kauffman Stadium? Independence, maybe? Indiana. Woo. Well, you know, we could go there, but I don't want to walk it. So let's go out, jump in our cars. We'll head up to the 70 and head east. Oh, wait. This is Wait. This is a representation of where we are in our Milky Way. Not an actual picture of a Milky Way. We've got nothing gone anywhere near that far. Yeah. Right. So if we leave now and we're heading down the 70, in about 3.5 hours, we're going to get to Indianapolis. And I'm hungry. So let's stop and get a bite to eat. Then we'll jump back on the 70 and continue. Later this evening, we'll get to Indianapolis. Hey, I'm hungry again. I mean, we've been on the road for 7.5 hours. Let's stop over at that McDonald's, get a bite to eat, and then there's a Motel 6. We'll spend the night. Get up the next morning, have a good breakfast, and we're on our way to Cleveland. Somebody said Cleveland earlier. All right, we get to Cleveland. I don't want to stay there. Quick lunch, drive-through, and we're on our way again. That evening, we skip right past Buffalo. Tomorrow, the next day, rather, we're going to stop in Albany and have lunch. Then, the following day, we're going to get to Boston. We're going to find another tennis ball. That's basically what's it between here and Boston. Those 9 itty-bitty little or 8 itty-bitty little planets and the one minor that we saw. It's really empty out there. Did I keep it under 11? Right.
All right. Thank you, Chuck. Oh, yeah.
That's what happens when you don't use notes. Mercury, Venus. Go out tonight when the sun is going down. Look to the west. That's where the sun is going down. You're going to see a real bright star up there. Now, if it moves, it's an airplane. But if it doesn't move, that's Venus. Look down towards the horizon. About halfway between Venus and where the sun was, you may or may not see another little dot of light. That's Mercury. You can see both of them. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Chuck. Excellent. That was very good. So, I guess next is our coffee break. So during the coffee break, be sure to introduce yourself to somebody new if you've never met them before. Also see the TV above the center doors in the lobby for more Oasis announcements, and we'll see you back in like 20 minutes. So let's get that started. Well, welcome back from the coffee break. Hopefully you got to meet somebody new. And that will bring us to our musical, musical guest again. Let's welcome back Aaron and John for some more music. Remember, we have a cash tip jar right here for them, and their Venmo link as well, and we'll be putting the lyrics up as well again.
Thanks again. Thanks again for having me here. It was very nice to meet several of you just now, and I hope to meet more of you. The next two songs are selections from Manuel de Falla's 1914 song cycle, Siete Canciones Populares Españolas, which means 7 popular Spanish songs. These are art songs, so very creative representation of his composition. The first song is called Asturiana, which is named after Asturias, a region in northern Spain, we'll say. And Jota is the second song. I've got some translations for you to see up here. The texts are pretty short.
Que no nos queremos, dicen que no nos queremos, porque no nos ven hablar a tu corazón y al mío. Se lo puede despido de ti. Ya me despido de ti. De tu casa y tu ventana. Y aunque no quiera tu madre, adiós, niña, hasta mañana. Adiós, niña, hasta mañana. Ya me despido de ti. Aunque no quiera tu madre.
All right, thank you very much for sharing your musical talents with us again. Next up, we are going to have our featured speaker. So I've got a little quick disclaimer. Our program is designed to generate conversation and engage our powers of reason, not as a forum to start debates. The following presentation has been prepared by our speaker and not by Kansas City Oasis. So please respect the views of our speaker. And if you have questions, we're going to have a Q&A portion at the end. So I am going to advance here real quick. I'm going to say Laura Ingalls Wilder is here to tell us a little bit about, I believe, herself. So I'm going to let us step back in time where technology does not exist to about 1947.
May I have your hand coming up? I did just turn 80 last month. So, well, good morning, and I am so very honored to be here today, and I have truly enjoyed the musical presentation. If you know my story at all, you know that music was a big part of my life. Pa playing the fiddle was our main form of entertainment. And if you also know the story of my life, you know I'm not very comfortable speaking to groups, so I hope you'll forgive me if I'm kind of nervous, because this is quite a large group for what I'm used to over in Mansfield, Missouri. Well, I figure that most of you are here today because you knew who I was, because you've read my books, and I thank you most sincerely. Once the book started to get popular and I got letters from the children, their number one question was, are you the Laura in the books? And I tell them, yes, indeed, I am. And everything I wrote was the truth. I just didn't tell all of the truth. You'll notice I didn't spend a lot of time talking about outhouses and birthing babies and things like that, that I just really felt like the really young children just didn't need all of those details. The number one question I get when adults write to me is, why did you write the books? And it's a very short, simple answer with a lot of information behind it. I wrote the books to earn some money. And how we got to that point means I need to go back farther into my life. When Almanzo and I got married, I told him I didn't want to be a farmer's wife. I had seen what it was like for Ma and Pa trying to raise us as a farmer when you had to actually break the sod and start from scratch. So we agreed we'd give it 4 years, and if it didn't work out, we would try something different. It didn't work out, but I'm still a farmer's wife. The books take it up to where we were married. And I mainly quit writing it there because I didn't want to write about the sad, bad things that happened. In the first 4 years that we were married, we had our daughter Rose. We named her Rose because I was so fond of the little wild roses that grew all over the prairie. In fact, that's the reason I bought this particular hat. These little roses on here look so much like those wild roses. We also had a baby boy who died just within a few months. Almanzo and I both got very, very ill. It turns out it was diphtheria. And because he was the man of the house, he felt like he needed to get up out of his sick bed and start trying to take care of me, and that caused him to have a stroke. He recovered mostly from that. He uses a built-up shoe, and he still walks with a bit of a limp. And using his fingers is really a challenge for him. We had a fire that burned up our house, and we lost everything. I decided we needed to try to do something different. My parents were living in the town of DeSmet by then, and so we moved in with them. We also moved to be with Almanzo's family for a while in Wisconsin, and they kept talking about one of his cousins who had moved to Florida, and that was simply what we must consider doing. The extremely cold winters there in South Dakota were very rough for Manly, so we thought, well, maybe going to the better climate down in Florida would be helpful. So we went down there. Those months I spent there were the longest decade of my life. I was totally miserable. It was so hot, and they had the word humidity. I wasn't used to that. It was only marginally better for Almanzo. We gave up after a little while, deciding we might as well go back to DeSmet. So we did. We moved in with my parents, which meant Rose was able to go to the school and really spend time with her grandmother and her grandfather and my sisters. The railroad was very actively recruiting for people to move closer to where they were building lines. And the Bluebird line was being built from St. Louis down southern Missouri, right along Mansfield into St. Louis and on. And they were advertising the Mansfield area as the land of the big red apple. We decided that maybe southern Missouri would be enough warmer during the winter that Almanzo wouldn't be so miserable, and land was probably at a reasonable price. So we began to make plans. Almanzo fixed his wagon and his horses and hauled things for people, earning money that way. I began sewing for a lady. I mostly was in charge of doing buttonholes. I don't want to brag, but I was able to do 10 buttonholes in an hour. So we were able to save every penny, and by the start of the summer, we took all of the bills and change we had saved up to the bank, and we got a crisp $100 bill, and we decided we were ready to start the trek to move to Missouri. There was another family named the Coolies who were also thinking that maybe Missouri would suit them better, and they had 2 young boys, both just a little older than Rose. So they made good traveling companions for us. Manly fixed up our wagon by putting hoops up over it and stretching canvas over that. And then he was worried about the rain soaking everything, so he coated the canvas with tar. And about the 4th of July, we were ready to leave De Smet. And it took us nearly 6 weeks through South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas in July and August in a black covered wagon. I think you all know exactly how hot it can get around here. I had a thermometer in the wagon, and it one time registered as high as 114. And then suddenly, the thermometer disappeared. Both Almanzo and Rose said they had no idea where it could have gone. I think they decided they wouldn't feel as hot if they didn't know exactly how hot it was. And my thermometer never did reappear. As we traveled with the coolies, we would make camp every night, and I had somebody to help with the chores of cooking. And the children were able to run and play a little bit. We never really spent time traveling on Sundays, so we could take a little bit of a rest. It was quite an experience. The cages with my chickens were strapped on the outside of the wagons, and every night we'd have to pull out the stuff we needed to cook and to sleep on, and every morning put it back away again. We were able to bargain and trade just a little bit for some fresh vegetables as we came along the way. Alonzo had brought some wonderful little mats to put in the fire where you could set the coffee pot right on it. They were made out of something called asbestos. Anyway, he would trade those for some fresh corn on the cob or something like that as we traveled. And occasionally he could do a little hunting and get us some fresh meat. Well, we eventually, after 6 weeks, made it to the western border of Missouri. And I can't begin to tell you how happy both Almanzo and I were when we saw trees. After so many years on the prairie, where the only trees we saw were the tiny little seedlings that we'd helped plant and that we were trying to keep watered well enough to get alive, to suddenly really see the woods that we had known in our youth. We'd camped out a couple extra days just north of Springfield, and we decided we liked the looks of that city pretty well, and we might come back there if we didn't find what we were looking for in Mansfield. But both of us moved our wagons onto Mansfield and set up a little campsite. And the very next day, Almanzo went out riding, trying to look for some property that he would like to have for us to farm. It didn't take him very many days to come back with some big news. He'd found the perfect thing. I went into the wagon to change into my best clothes to go to the bank, and I had this beautiful little writing desk that unfolded that Almanzo had made for me, and that's where I had stored that $100 bill, in with all my stationery and everything, and I couldn't find it. I flipped through all the sheets of paper. It was just gone. I called Rose and I said, "Did you ever say anything about that? Did you tell anybody about it? Did you touch it?" And she promised that she hadn't. And I knew the coolies wouldn't have taken it, but I could not imagine what could have happened to it. So I sadly had to tell Almanzo that we could not go to the bank that day. A couple weeks later, he came back from a ride even more excited that he had found an even better place. This time I decided I wasn't going to waste time changing clothes, but I was going to look one more time for for that money. As I opened the front cover of the desk and laid it down, underneath the green felt that it was lined with, I could see the tiniest corner of a piece of white paper. I pulled on that corner, and it was the edge of that $100 bill. It was so new and crisp that it had managed to slide underneath that felt and was totally hidden. I very quickly ran to Almanzo, and we went into town to talk to the bankers. The piece of property we bought, we called Rocky Ridge. And if you know southern Missouri at all, you know why that's an appropriate name. Stone County, where Springfield is not named for a Mr. Stone. So we began to make our home there. There was, shack is probably the best word for the structure that was there. It was only marginally built better than living in the wagon. But we decided it would do for just a little while. Our most important thing was to get our farm started. The gentleman that we bought the place from had ordered in hundreds of small apple trees. He hadn't had time to plant them, but what he'd done was dig a bit of a trench and just put them all in there and cover them with dirt so that he could keep them alive. So that was our very first project. We knew it was going to take years for those trees to start bearing enough to do us any good for an apple crop. Once we had the trees all planted, we started trying to work the ground a little bit. Rocky Ridge means there's a lot of rocks. And we started picking them up and piling them where we needed them. They became the foundation. Rose and Manley brought the rocks, and I placed them, fitting them together, choosing the right rock to fill in the space. Then we started talking about the fireplace. It was going to be a wooden home, and almost everything in our home came from our property, including the wood, cut down the trees and turned them into planks. I had my heart set on a fireplace on the outside of the house with the chimney going all the way up, great big and wide, and going up to the roof. The men that were helping Almanzo did not really want to do that much work on it. Ladies, I have to admit to you, I used my tears to get my way. That is the only time that I have ever done that, but even the gentleman helping Almanzo could not say no to me then. So when you come to visit my home, be sure and compliment him on that fireplace. So we got the house built. Rose was going to school in Mansfield, and one of the things that we enjoyed the most about that school was that it had a library. And if you know my story, you know how important books were and how limited they were in my childhood. So Rose would bring a different book home from the library as fast as we'd finish one. And in the evenings, for some entertainment, one of us would read aloud to the other two. Rose and I both did a lot of needlework. And for Manley, to keep his fingers moving just a little bit better, he often worked making rag rugs. So two of us could work on a project while the other one read aloud. And that's the way we passed our evenings. I truly did miss Pa and his fiddle because we had such a quiet life once we got moved to Missouri. Well, the years passed and Rose was doing exceptionally well in school. And one summer, we were paid a visit by one of Almanzo's sisters, Eliza Jane. In the story, she's the one that came to be the teacher at the school, and she had a tree farm relatively near us. She had given it up just before we did, and in her adventurous travels, she met a gentleman who was a widower and had 2 sons. They married, and they were living in Louisiana. So she had taken them up north to meet her family, and of course she had to come through Missouri to go home to Louisiana. I think it was love at first sight when Eliza Jane and Rose met. Rose is like my pa in that he was always ready to move somewhere else. But unlike Pa, who wanted to move away from people, away from civilization, Rose wanted to go to where the city was bigger, more opportunities. And when Eliza Jane offered to let her come to Louisiana and to her last 2 years of school with them, I couldn't talk her out of it. It was a very hard decision to make to let our only child go off for 2 years, but I did it. I also wasn't very excited that it was Eliza Jane that she was going with. If I had known she was going to be my sister-in-law, I might not have been so naughty to her when I was a child. But at least she's not Almanzo's favorite sister. So the state of Louisiana insisted that Rose take a test to make sure she was smart enough to go to school there. I can tell you she did very, very well on the test. When she came back to Mansfield, she was calling herself a bachelor girl, the new term for young women who weren't getting married right away but were going to have some adventures and a career. She got to Mansfield, and in talking to one of her very good friends from school, whose father was the telegrapher there in Mansfield, he told her he was going to train to be a telegrapher also, because you could go anywhere in the United States and get a job. That sounded like a wonderful idea to our Rose, so she trained right along with him, did very well on her examination, and she first went to Sedalia to work for the Western Union, and then she got to go to Kansas City to work for Western Union doing telegraphs. While she was in Kansas City, she started doing some writing for the local newspaper, got some experience doing actual news articles. She'd always been quite the writer, keeping a diary of what she did, but that gave her an idea that maybe writing could be part of her future. Well, it didn't take very long for Kansas City to not be big enough for her either, and going west seemed the thing. She ended up in San Francisco, and she married a young man who seemed to have more ideas than money. None of his great plans ever quite really worked out, but they were in San Francisco, and while they were there, the Panama American Exposition, what we call the World's Fair, was taking place. Rose had been after me to come to visit, and I had resisted a little bit, but when she was talking about everything that was going on at the World's Fair, I decided that that might be an adventure that I'd like. Almanzo was going to stay home because we couldn't leave all the animals and chores for somebody else, so I went and took the train by myself from Mansfield to Kansas City and then on west. I was very impressed with San Francisco because after the earthquake and fire, so much of their city had been destroyed, and I got to see how they had rebuilt. We went to the World's Fair several times, and I was exceedingly impressed with the Missouri exhibit. I had been doing a few articles for Missouri Ruralist, mostly things like how to work with your chickens so that you get eggs all winter long, and whatever was kind of in season on the farm. They titled my articles As the Farm Woman Thinks. So I started to get the idea, maybe the Missouri Ruralist would like to have an article about the Missouri exhibit at the World's Fair. I sent them a telegram, and they very quickly replied back, yes, send it. So that meant a couple more times to go visit at the World's Fair. And while I was there with Rose, we started talking about how to make pictures so that people can really see what it is that you're talking about. That was the seed that was planted. So Rose goes on with all kinds of adventures. She went to Europe several times. She worked for the Red Cross, visiting at the hospitals where our soldiers were being taken care of, and she reported back on their care, and she saw and did so many things. But she was always earning money writing stories and even some books. And while she was earning money, she was also spending it. Her father was fairly concerned and said, I think she's never earned a penny she hasn't already spent. For Christmas of 1929, she bought Almanzo and I a house out of the Montgomery Ward catalog with all the extra bells and whistles, indoor plumbing, and it came out at a whopping $14,000. And if you know your history, within the next year, the stock market crashed. Rose had invested in it, and she had advised me to invest my savings in it. So suddenly, we were going to have no money. We'd lost everything. And I thought, I cannot lose this farm. I saw what it did to my pa, losing farm after farm, and Manley and I losing the farm in South Dakota. I knew I couldn't let that happen to him again. So I sat down and wrote the book about my childhood. I called it Pioneer Girl. Rose had friends in New York City where she had a friend type what I had written out on the Big Chief tablets, and then she submitted it to a friend at the publishing company. Unfortunately, it was the Depression for the publishing company too, so they didn't want to take a risk on a beginning writer. And luckily for me, one young woman read the book and said, why didn't I take the first part, my very first early years, and write it as a book for children? They published it in the fall so that it came out just in time for Christmas giving. And a book makes a wonderful Christmas present when you don't have much money for presents, because it's enjoyed over and over by the whole family. And then the letters started coming to the publisher. What happens to Laura and Mary next? They sent me a telegram asking if I would consider writing another book. They never had a serialized story for children before, and I thought I was more than willing to be the first. So that's how the stories came to be written, and it has been such an overwhelming experience to have people from all over the United States write to me. I'm very sad to say that I am the last one of my family left alive. Ma and Pa, Mary, Grace, and Carrie have all passed away. And it's so rewarding to know that when the children write to me, they ask about them. They keep the memory alive. That was a bonus that I could never have anticipated from writing the stories. But I have even bigger news to share. Now that I've got a little sad and serious. So, as I mentioned that during the Depression, vanity, I have to have glasses to read. During the Depression, when my books were published, they were on cheap quality paper, and I have been informed that they are all going to be reprinted with new art by a young man named Garth Williams. He got famous for doing some art for a story about a little mouse. So they have sent me a sketch that he has done. He came to the house to meet with me and ask specific questions about where I've lived, and he is going to every single one of the home sites so that when he draws the pictures for the stories, he'll know exactly what it was to look like. And as exciting as that is, I have even bigger news. I have been informed that my books, especially the one called The Long Winter, when we were trapped in by snow and nearly froze and nearly starved to death, is being translated into both German and Japanese to be sent to the children. I was asked to write a little bit of a letter to go at the front of the books, and this is what I've written. Tell me if you think it will work. Dear Japanese children, though you are far away and speak a different language, still the things worthwhile in life are the same for us all, and the same as when I was a child so long ago. Things of real value do not change with the passing of years, nor in going from one country to another. These are things I'm sure you know. It is always best to be honest and truthful, to make the most of what we have, to be happy with simple pleasures, to be cheerful in adversity, and have courage in danger. With love to you all and best wishes for your happiness, sincerely yours, Laura Ingalls Wilder. Is that okay? So,
all right. I think we've got 1 minute for some questions. So real quick, if anybody
her
has a
hand went
question.
up right away.
All right, and please wait till the mic gets to you.
Did Mary really go blind?
Yes, Mary really did go blind, and she learned to do many things like some crocheting and knitting just by sense of touch.
Hi, thank you so much. You said that you titled the first book Pioneer Girl. Who came up with the Little House on the Prairie title? Was that you or your publisher?
Oh, between Rose and I, we did.
Excellent. And maybe one more question, and then we're gonna.
I have a question about Long Winter. You know, recently, about the book The Long Winter.
Yes.
Okay, recently we went through a time here where it was very, very cold. I mean, it was 4 or 5 days.
Yes.
And that's what I thought of. I thought of your book. So how did you survive that?
Well, I kind of minimized it in the stories, but let me tell you, you are always feeling hungry when you have a tiny loaf of bread to be shared with the family as the only food during that day. And because of Almanzo and his friend going to get wheat from someplace that had some, every morning we carefully ground just enough wheat to make the bread for that day. And burning anything that we had available to burn just to stay warm.
Excellent. Well, I think if you have some more questions, she'll be available in the lobby afterwards. But thank you very much for that trip back in time.
Yes, thank you. I didn't see you do 20.
Oh, I forgot to put that slide up for the questions. So, you know. I guess what I learned from that is next time you're on a family road trip and your kids are screaming about which Harry Potter movie to watch in the back of the minivan, think about Laura Ingalls Wilder's trip in a mobile sauna in the middle of summer.
For 6 weeks.
All righty. So, thank you all for joining us at Oasis today. We are a 501c3, so I think you know where I'm going with this. If you like what we do run on donations. So if you want to help us out and continue, supporting our programs here, we've got Venmo links, we've got links on our websites. Obviously, reoccurring donations are kind of the best for us. So. Be sure to do that. And then I will bring up Aaron Barksdale and John Mueter again for one more song.
Thank you very much. Please consider holding your applause till the end because it is more than one song, but they're very short little vignettes. These are folk songs, traditional folk songs from Andalusia, which is in the south of Spain, where Seville is located. And these are kind of flamenco songs, if you will, and they were arranged by a very famous poet by the name of Garcia Lorca. Thank you.
Yo me subí a un pino verde por ver si la divisaba, por ver si la divisaba. Y solo divisé el polvo del coche que la llevaba, del coche que la llevaba. Anda, jaleo, jaleo, ya se acabó el alboroto y ahora empieza el tiroteo, y ahora empieza el tiroteo. En la calle de los muros la han matado una paloma, han matado una paloma. Debajo de la hoja de la verbena, debajo de la hoja, debajo de la hoja, tengo a mi amante Malus Jesús, qué pena. Debajo de la hoja de perejil, debajo de la hoja, debajo de la hoja, tengo a mi amante malo y no puedo oír. Los mozos de Monleón se fueron a arar temprano, ay, ay, se fueron a arar temprano para ir a la corrida y remudar con despacio. Ay, ay, y remudar con despacio. Al toro tengo que ir, aunque vaya de prestado. Ay, ay, aunque vaya de prestado. Cuando el toro lo dejó, ya lo ha dejado sangrando. Ay, ay. Tres moricas me enamoran en Jaén, Asha y Fátima y Marién. Tres morillas tan garridas iban a coger olivas y allá van las cogidas en Jaén, Asha y Fátima y Marién. Y allá van las cogidas y tornaban desmaídas, y los colores perdidos en Jaén, Asha y Fátima y Marién. Tres moricas me enamoran en Jaén, Asha y Fátima y Marién. De los cuatro muleros, de los cuatro muleros, de los cuatro muleros, mamita mía, que van al campo, que van al campo. El de la mula torda, el de la mula torda, el de la mula torda, mamita mía, moreno y alto, moreno y alto. De los cuatro muleros, de los cuatro muleros, de los cuatro muleros, mamita mía, es mi marido, es mi marido.
That was fantastic. So we got to travel back in time a little bit, practice our, Spanish comprehension there for those of us that understood very small amount of that I did. All right, so anyhow, next up, join us for lunch after Oasis at the Crown Center Food Court. Choose your lunch at one of the many, available restaurants that they have there, and then we'll kind of gather around, push several tables together, and continue our conversation. Address is up there in case you don't know, but if you're from the area, you probably know how to get to Crown Center. And then this is our building. We love it. We want to keep it clean, so if you can, take a look around and clean up after yourselves. We also need more volunteers, so every week check, the descriptions on our private page and sign up to, provide coffee or donuts or clean up, something like that. It really does help us out, be part of the community. Our next week featured speaker will be Jude Law, speaking on the Able account, and our musical guest will be Chris, and the community moment will be Bill Barnes. We want to thank this week's presenter, Nancy, as well, and our musicians, Aaron and John, Chuck for the community moment, and thank you all for being here, tuning in online, and we will see you next week.